exciting episode prepared for you. We're going to bust the myth that both political parties have been peddling during this election in Jamaica. Both parties have made promises, no extravagant promises that had no base in reality. We will expose the truth behind the facade of business as usual, looking to return to normality in the short term. Well, you could buy into their promises and their analysis of what tomorrow will bring. Enjoy the party at your own peril, because you may not survive tomorrow's hangover. Take note of Marus Gravey's warning so many years ago. He said to Jamaicans, if you're not ready, you will die. Well, once again, allow me to introduce my co-host and resident Jamaican exile, Raymond Grant. He will share with you his findings and sobering analysis of what is waiting for Jamaica if we choose to follow the political party's position of business as usual, and there is promises of plenty for all, where that might bring us. Raymond?
Thank you, Asa. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We will start with some very sobering news. As of today, the 1st of September, while we're taping, the total cases of COVID-19 in Jamaica are 2,459. Jamaica has recorded 102 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours. So that's several per hour. And the death toll has gone up to 21. A number of people are going to suffer long-term and permanent organ damage, even if they do recover. We extend our sympathies to those who are suffering with this disease and with this virus, and we can only hope that and pray that this raging virus, which is now seems to me to be out of control, something will be done about it by the government and the people of Jamaica. I have the Honorable Marus Gravey had something very relevant, very important to say to Jamaicans. Many, many years ago, it was a crucial time in our history too. It was before independence. And I'm quoting the Honorable Marus Gravey in 1921. He said to Jamaicans, black people in general, he was talking actually, the great problem of black people in the last 500 years has been their disunity. He went on to say, any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another is a leadership that will enslave you. Marus Gravey was an advocate for self-reliance. He would be appalled at the indiscipline that is now happening in Jamaica in relation to the coronavirus, and at the self-serving policies disguised as we will take care of you, of the Jamaican politicians. And he would also be appalled at the clientelism that is the tradition in Jamaica's politics.
By the politicians saying, I'll take care of you, actually it sounds like a good thing, doesn't it?
It comes back to what we're talking about, these extravagant promises.
So they never come true. That's the problem, right?
Exactly.
They lull the public with a very slick campaign and very, very good orators, and convincing the population to place their trust in them. But historically, even in the recent history, it shows that the political parties are making promises that they can't keep, and they don't really care to address why they have not kept it.
Exactly. For example, in the last campaign, the JLP promised during their 4 years, which is now coming to a close, obviously, one more day to go in their regime, They had made two major promises. They made some others, but the two were the ones that really swung voters, I think. One was they promised Jamaicans growth. It was called 5 in 4, a growth rate of 5% in 4 years. What has been achieved? Less than 2%. Matter of fact, something in average over the last 4 years, I would say, is in the region of 1.7%. Last year it was 1.9%, according to the World Bank. So that was one promise made and one promise not kept. The second major promise was that, and Mr. Holness said this himself on the platform, that we Jamaicans would be, he was the problem of crime. He said that Jamaicans would be able to sleep with their doors and windows.
So the actually, what is the actual? I mean, the crime rate has been growing, or has it remained the same since? It's always been a problem, right?
It's been an ongoing problem.
And that's why
there's been little dips now and again. They unleash the army. They declare a state of emergency. There's a temporary dip.
The last episode you had mentioned that the various interest groups came together against crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that did not really result in a permanent solution or permanent fix. So in fact, even after such a effort, and even though after all the promises of the government in power of providing this kind of, leaving your door unlocked kind of situation, it actually has not gotten any better, and there's still a substantial crime wave that has awashed Jamaica.
Yes, that is accurate. So I'm going to go on and quote Mr. Garvey, because if you don't listen to us, you will listen to the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And I quote Garvey again in 1921. He's talking to us. If we are not prepared to unite as a people, then we will die. You race of cowards, you race of imbeciles, you race of good-for-nothings. If you cannot do it, if you cannot unite, if you cannot behave, then you will die. That is what Garvey told us many years ago. And we are not behaving. We're not wearing masks. We're not social distancing. We're not wearing gloves and so on. We're gathering in crowds. So, we're dying. Got another prediction of Marcus Mosiah Garvey has come through. So all I can say to Jamaicans is the ball is in your court. Mr. Garvey has warned us. We have been talking about it on these episodes. The ball is in your court.
But I think there is something even, maybe even more prophetic that within what his warning was, is that given that the Jamaican people has fractured into all their own different interests, and allowing the big clientele of the government to drive the country in directions that is counter to the majority best interest, right?
Exactly.
And in that way, the dream of Jamaica, that with realizing its potential, is died.
Exactly. It's open. Garvey called us a race of cowards, a race of imbeciles, a race of good-for-nothings. And when I see what is happening in the political arena in Jamaica at the moment, I have to say, he's right. We're a bunch of cowards. We're a bunch of imbeciles. And we must be good-for-nothings. Look at what's happening in the political arena. Both parties have offered these huge baskets of goodies in their manifestos. Okay? I don't really want to spend too much time on these manifestos because I don't even want to give them the dignity of discussion, really.
Mm.
But apparently, some people are taking it seriously, and the leaders are talking to us with straight faces.
Mm.
So they're trying to. I think they know it's a bunch of crap, but they are, con men are good at these things. And our political establishment, as I've said before, is dominated by a bunch of genials, thieves, and grinning con men, snake oil salesmen, who make used car salesmen look like angels. So, the PNP basket of goodies will cost Jamaica 78 billion out of a total budget of 800 billion, and these things tend to overrun, so we're talking 10% of the budget right there. The JLP goodies, and that's a pre-COVID budget too, and the JLP goodies, which are just a watered down version of the PNP basket, would cost Jamaica $50 billion. So, my sources for these are the Jamaica Observer newspaper recently.
So we're talking about the PNP is offering 78 billion, and the JLP is offering 50 billion. So a difference of about 28 billion in between there. Right?
Free houses or social housing, which usually they live in them for free, or anyway, like housing, they're gonna build 170 housing solutions according to the PNP in 4 years, which has never ever been done, ever, nothing even remotely close.
Right.
And the JLP has promised what they call a more realistic 70,000 housing solutions in 4 years. I think also that is highly, highly, highly impossible.
Well, didn't we just to dial in the reality on our first episode? We were looking at a situation where we may have to go to Jamaica may have to go to the IMF just to keep them going, right?
Yeah, funny enough.
Yeah,
both parties.
Now they've got all this money.
Well, again, the fantasy continues. Both parties have said they're not going to the IMF.
Oh, I see.
Right?
Okay.
They apparently have some magic wands we don't know about.
Despite the fact they publish in BOJ what they really have.
Exactly.
Right? So
their slogans: the JLP has promised a stronger future. The PNP has promised wealth. This is the PNP is a party that's been in power in Jamaica for most of Jamaica's existence as an independent country. And the country has been just getting poorer and poorer and poorer under their administration. And all of a sudden, they're going to create wealth.
For everybody.
For everybody.
Yeah.
Good times, they promise, are ahead. And the problem is that hopes are being raised and the opposite is going to happen. Good times, I'm sorry to tell you, sorry to rain on the parade, but good times are not coming. As a matter of fact, a social and economic tsunami is coming. We are here in this crowded theater yelling fire, not because we want to, there is no fire, the building is on fire, the world is on fire, COVID-19 is raging, millions and millions and millions have become infected, and Jamaica will be no exception. Every country reaches a tipping point. We mentioned that in the previous episode. In Lebanon, they had the massive explosion and the government fell. In Rwanda, years ago, it was the massive tribal massacre, which actually ended up turning the country around. So it was a terrible thing, but it turned the country around. So sometimes a crisis does not go to waste. So I think it's important that we burst this bubble, because Jamaica is a part of the world, and if the world is on fire, Jamaica gonna burn.
Well, especially since Jamaica's main industry, employing 1 in 4, depends so much of the world coming to Jamaica in terms of tourism and such, right?
Yeah. And if we don't handle this crisis properly, this is what's going to happen. It's during the Depression, the majority, we're talking about tipping points, many countries tipped backwards, right? Leading to the war eventually. The majority of countries during the Depression underwent some sort of political upheaval. pushing them to the right. Many of the countries in Europe, we know about Nazi Germany and so on, but many of the countries in Europe, Italy and so on, and many countries in Latin America that were democracies saw them overthrown by some form of dictatorship or authoritarian rule. So, according to the IMF, if you thought the depression was bad, the economic crisis, I'm quoting the IMF in their bulletin 30th of July. The economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis like no other, as the global economy is projected to lose over $12 trillion. And they ask the question, what is the expected impact on rising debt levels in emerging markets and low-income countries like Jamaica? See, Jamaica is not going to be an exception. Jamaica is going to, according to the IMF, be the worst hit nation in this region. In fact, because of how Jamaica is structured, because of how its economy is structured, and we talked about this one-legged, hobbling economy, one leg being the tourism industry, the IMF predicts that Jamaica will be the worst hit country in the region. I repeat that. We are not going to be just average. We're going to be more worst hit than other countries in this region. See, pre-COVID-19, the Jamaican economy was hobbling along on its one leg with some support from the remittances being the other leg. But for all intents and purposes, Jamaica itself was a one-leg economy. And I quote Mr. Golding in the 27th of August in the Observer, when he said, the government inherited from the PNP a stable and improving macroeconomic situation. Well, I don't know who it was improving for. Certainly the mercantile class, the banks, and the political establishment. I'm sure for them it was improving.
Well, I mean, perhaps prior to that, prior to the COVID-19, in the 2018-2019 economy of North America, North American economy overall has grown during that period.
Yeah.
And as a spillover, I think Jamaica was getting its share. But now we're looking at major upheaval in North American economy and global economy. So given that Jamaica relies on this foreign, this foreign market, right? And they depend on foreign exchange. None of those are going to be forthcoming in a recession, and in this case, another possible depression. Nobody's going to be, holidaying. Nobody's going to be going anywhere. Their economy themselves. I mean, the U.S. is still experiencing very high levels of unemployment. Despite what rosy picture Donald Trump is trying to paint, the worst is yet to come. There's going to be a whole host of bankruptcies and defaults and so on, as the world has not seen before. Exactly. So if that's the case, then where do you suppose the parties found that all those billions of dollars are going to fulfill their promises, I wonder?
Remember, they have a magic wand. You see, this virus has exposed the weaknesses and injustice of the Jamaican single-tier tourism-based economy, which is hobbled by government corruption, nepotism, cronyism, and the clientelism we've spoken about before. A return to the status quo is not going to be sufficient, acceptable, or sustainable, if it's even possible. Certainly not in the short run. As we discussed in the last episode, the virus, in my opinion, has caused Jamaica to reach a tipping point. So in future episodes, stay tuned. We're going to be suggesting some ways that Jamaica can tip forward and navigate through the social and economic tsunami that is being caused by the virus, and towards a more resilient, more just Jamaica, free of, which would have lower corruption, less nepotism, less cronyism and clientelism, and be a more equitable society. According to Kristalina Georgieva, she's the director of the IMF, I hope I have not mispronounced her name. I quote her, she says, "There are no quick, rapid solutions to the economic crisis." Again, she said this in the same IMF bulletin on a few days ago, 30th of July. So every strategy we mention in the coming episodes are going to have winners and losers, upsides and downsides. There are going to be risks and benefits. And so it will be tricky to navigate this crisis because of that. Jamaica is not going to be able to rely, like we have done in the past, on China so much, because in the past Jamaica has been a major source of foreign capital financing, but even China now is in trouble, right? According to Ian Bremer, who is the president and founder of the Eurasia Group, in the IMF YouTube The Exchange on the 30th of July as well. So these are some effects that Jamaica doesn't have much of a productive sector, really. We just have mainly a hospitality sector, but there is some production going on. There is some bauxite and so on. According to the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association Productive Sector Impact Survey, 59% of those industries are considering temporary or permanent closure of businesses. That's more than half. 51%, again more than half, have temporarily reduced staff. 14% have laid off up to 50% of their staff. So the next global depression is coming, and optimism and manifestos chatting crap are not going to slow it down. I'm going to quote again Mr. Bremer, the foreign affairs editor of Time, and as I said, he's involved with the Eurasia Group. Liquidity support along with optimism about a vaccine has boosted financial markets and may well continue to elevate stocks in the US. But this financial bridge isn't big enough to span the gap from past to future economic vitality, because COVID-19 has created a crisis for the real economy, and the stock market is going to eventually catch up with that. So a crash is coming for the market as well, and bursting that bubble, because there's a bubble going on there right now. You are a former stockbroker, and
well,
so you
I actually was
and a stock
I was
trader.
I was a treasury officer as well as as head of business development for a stockbroking major stockbroking firm in Singapore. I've been keeping up with the various analysis given the current strange situation happening, as you indicated. In the past, Peter Lynch, with the legendary Peter Lynch, had indicated that his theory was that you look on Main Street and you could see the future of Wall Street, because what works on Main Street will eventually become will manifest itself on Wall Street.
Exactly.
However, what's happening now is what's happening on Main Street is totally ignored by Wall Street because of all these unnatural acts that's being done by the Fed and the government of the United States. So they are keeping interest rate at zero. So nobody's saving. Everybody is, and anybody have any inkling of investing can borrow at 0%. And given the recent rise of stock prices, everybody's jumping into the stock market, and a crash, I think bigger than 1929 is coming up, because
Wow.
this condition cannot last forever.
Yeah.
There's gonna be a reckoning. Right now, people are jumping on the short-term rise in the market, and because when you look at it, during this past period, more than 12, 13% of the population is unemployed, and they're on the dole. Government assistance as it was is just enough for just the day-to-day, just to tide them over. But for those who is facing an impending unemployment or is unemployed and they got any extra money, and hearing all this talk about making a killing in the stock market, they're jumping in feet first. In fact, the amateur investor accounted for a higher volume than the professionals, and they have made more money than the professional, partly because they're chasing after bankrupt companies like Hearst, just artificially boost up because of interest, and these are all the behaviors that was present in the 1929.
Exactly.
Exactly. And in fact, one of the more respected legendary investors, Warren Buffett, has put a bunch of cash on the sideline and has bought into gold, which he has already
Exactly.
yeah. So all these people who are in the know are preparing for something really bad. Wow. The amateur, the guy on the street is blinded by the short-term rise and thinking the times are good. Now, I see the same thing happening in Jamaica, because, our first episode indicated that the bank is running out of money, right? Foreign exchange is dwindling, and more than likely, the motivation behind the snap election was so that they have the mandate to, if need be, borrow money from IMF. And yet both parties are rolling out these, billion, 50 billion, 78 billion promises, and you kind of wonder where that money's coming from.
The magic one.
Yeah. So if that being the case, of course the population is lulled into a sense of complacency, saying, "Oh yes, good time are coming, good time coming." The problem with that is you get elected on that, but when that promise goes to nothing, and in fact that promise comes with the reckoning of a crash in the market and of the cupboard being bare, and with them having to go to IMF again, the people are going to be pissed, because you promised me the sun and the moon, and now we are begging the IMF again. And on top of that, where are the housing going to come from? No, sorry, we got to put bread on your table. Be realistic, guys. But once they're elected, they can say those things, right? But before, it looks like before the actual election, we don't mean to be disrespectful. We're laughing because the whole thing is just laughable, because these are intelligent, well-educated, and well-experienced politicians, and
who know better.
And they put themselves out as statesmen, as these pillars of government or society, and yet they're playing with. They don't. I mean I don't know if they even understand how dangerous the game is. Like we were saying, it's like the Titanic is heading for the iceberg, and they're on the decks of the Titanic playing their music.
The band is still playing.
Yeah, and they're playing the band. And when the ship hits the iceberg,
You're a stockbroker. What is going to happen when all this borrowed money is driving the market? When the crash comes, what happens to those people who borrowed money?
Well, if you were to look at 1929, they jump off buildings. Right? And people who have all, as is, there was one small shock earlier on that drove a bunch of people, all the amateur investors under that stockbroking outfit called Robin Hood. A lot of them lost, their savings, lost their shirts. But then again, when the market revived again, people are saying, "Wow, that was just that was it. That was the bottom. Let's go." And
It crashed again.
And
Worse crash.
It may, because right now what is leading the market in the U.S. is the Nasdaq, is the tech stocks.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
2000, the dot-com bubble, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so sure, they say, well, Amazon does make money, and Tesla and Facebook and those guys do make money. Well, they make money on, for instance, in the short term, when there is the Fed is printing money, right? But what's going to happen? Here's one scenario that might be possible. Okay, the Fed is printing money, so they're flushing the money into the market. Now, traditionally, when that happens, like in Germany, the Weimar Republic, right? Mm-hmm. When that happened, inflation went nuts, and then everybody paid for it, right? But now, because the U.S. Reserve is a reserve currency, and that they're pumping out all this money amidst this pandemic, which means they're filling a hole that has all but disappeared because of lack of movement in money, right? Mm-hmm. So, and lack of production in general. Mm-hmm. So what happens is the inflation is not really moving at the moment because they're keeping the rates at zero. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, however, as people lose confidence in the U.S., as they realize that for the dollars they're holding in their reserve is not actually worth what they are worth, right? Because the U.S. has been just printing trillion after trillion after trillion without anything to back it up. Well, what might happen is some of them might start to dump it. Already, China and Russia is trying to move away from the dollar's reserve, and I think they see that there is a possibility that when the market crash, all the printing in the world is not going to help. So what happens when some major country and then other countries start to move away from reserve? People are going to start selling the dollar, okay? Because other people are dealing with their inflation properly. Let's say even if they number of the other countries off the reserve basket currencies raise their interest rate to 2 or 3, in comparison of a possible devaluation of the dollar, and that they're offering you no interest for keeping your money in the U.S., they will sell the dollar and buy the other currency to get an actual return. When that happens, inflation is going to hit because the U.S. dollar is going to be value will drop and drop. So then all the investments will collapse because Amazon sells a lot. That's why they make their money. But who's there going to be there to buy their stuff?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. According to Ian Bremer, beg your pardon, he's a foreign trade editor for Time magazine. Right? He's not a lightweight. He said, he agrees with you. We're headed into a global depression, a period of economic misery that few living people have ever experienced. I mean, very few of us were alive in the 30s. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You'd have to be close to 100, right?
Yeah.
90 something. So that's what's coming. And he goes on to say, broad recognition that emergency measures, that's the measures being taken by the governments, won't be nearly enough to restore the U.S. economy to health. What's true in the U.S. will be true everywhere else. I posit that it will be even more true in a vulnerable economy like Jamaica's.
Right.
So he goes on to ask the question, what could world leaders do to shorten this global depression? And I'm quoting Mr. Bremer here. First of all, they could resist the urge to tell their people that brighter days are just around the corner. People need leaders to take responsibility for tough decisions. The Jamaican politicians need to resist the urge to tell the Jamaican people that brighter days are just around the corner. They're not. Okay? And I guess it was too much to expect the flotsam and jetsam that makes up our political establishment to act responsibly and explain and be forthright with the Jamaican people that some tough decisions are going to have to be made. You will recall that we talked about a U-shaped recovery in our last episode. Well, really, nobody really knows what's going to happen. Some like me are talking about a U-shaped recovery for 2020-21. But some others are saying it's going to be a jagged swoosh, as they call it. The V-shaped recovery, everybody's kind of let that go now. I think maybe only Trump is hanging on to that.
Well, he claims that we're already there because he says, look at the stock market's return.
Yeah, this is going to what we do. Nobody has had experiences, so we've never experienced anything like this in our lifetime. So I'm not gonna predict beyond 2021, but I'll still stick to the U-shaped recovery. What we do know is that according to the IMF, the falling world GDP, gross domestic product, in the year 2021, this year to next year, is going to be massive. So Jamaica's, as I mentioned before, Jamaica is very vulnerable because in Jamaica the government is not allowed, like some governments like the US, the government is not allowed to print money. Right? Any money the Jamaican have is to distribute his money from borrowing and from the foreign exchange reserves. That's what they're doing right now. Okay? Because there is remittances have come back to 40% of what they were before. But as I expect, that is probably going to decline again when the emergency benefits, like in Canada, the CERB, the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, ends this month. And in the US, I think the same. Or it ended last month, I think, in the US. Month, yeah. So that source of remittances, I think, is going to go back down a bit. So for all intents and purposes, Jamaica is not earning any foreign exchange. Because of the rise in the coronavirus, Britain has warned its citizens not to go to Jamaica, because if they go to Jamaica, they've removed Jamaica from the exempt countries list. If you go to Jamaica now from Britain, you have to quarantine 14 days when you go back. Mm-hmm. So if you take your vacation, 7 days the average vacation in Jamaica. So if you come 7-8 days to Jamaica, you not only can't go all over there, then you just have to stick to this resilient corridor, but then when you go back, you gotta be quarantined in your house for 14 days. And the quarantine in Britain and Canada and those places is not a joke like what it is in Jamaica. You really have to quarantine. Mm-hmm. So, you can't go back to your job if you have one, and you can't go out and do anything. You're stuck in your house for 2 weeks. Who's going to make that sacrifice? Mm-hmm. The US government, State Department has warned its citizens not to come to Jamaica because they said there's a danger of the health system being overwhelmed by the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. So, I suspect that the trickle of foreign exchange that is even coming in now through tourism is going to dry right up to just the occasional drop here and there. So the current situation of them distributing money and from borrowing and foreign exchange reserves is not a sustainable one for much longer, as we mentioned in the previous episode. We're talking a couple months here. Hence the reason for the elections, which we discussed in the previous episode, because after the election, I predict the gloves are going to come off.
Or the mask will come off. The
mask and the gloves. Yeah. The mask they're wearing and the gloves. Yeah, to stretch a metaphor.
And then they're going to start.
They will have to get tough about it because, reality is coming. I don't think massive governments are going to be able to continue to give massive bailouts again. Do you think that's possible?
Well, considering for their own operation, right? They're going to be they're going to be short. So where are they going to get that money to do this extra work?
Yeah.
And they're promises was not all that important to them after they got elected in the last election.
Exactly. So right.
all the more now they say, well, hey, sorry. I mean, it's not happening, so too bad, so sad, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So as we said previously in the previous episode, the Jamaican dollar and Jamaican economy will collapse without massive borrowing. And you can't go to the international capital markets for the kind of amounts that are going to be needed without, first of all, the government's hands are tied. The interest rate is already close to 0.5%. So when they go on them